Two women walked in. Both were prostitutes, and both came with the same claim. Each insisted that the living child in her arms belonged to her, and the dead child buried quietly the night before belonged to the other. There were no fathers, no witnesses, no proof, just a heartbreaking, high-stakes standoff in the presence of the king. And there came two women, and they stood before him. 1 Kings 3:16. One woman said, "We dwelled in the same house. I gave birth while she was there. On the third day she also gave birth, but her child died in the night." 1 Kings 3:17-19. She claimed the other woman switched the babies while she slept, stealing the living child and replacing it with the dead one. The other woman insisted the opposite. Two mothers, two babies, one alive, one dead, and one throne, tasked with the impossible. Solomon was born out of one of the most shameful chapters in King David's life, a story filled with lust, deceit, betrayal, and even death. He wasn't supposed to be king. He wasn't even supposed to be born. The kingdom still whispered of the shame, how King David had taken the wife of another man, sent him to die in battle, and married her to cover up the sin. From that union came a child, not just any child, but Solomon, the boy who would wear a crown not forged in glory, but in grief. Yet God had a plan, and he called this child Jedediah, beloved of the Lord. 2 Samuel 12:24-25. But how does a child born out of ashes become the builder of God's temple? How does a king gifted with divine wisdom fall into idolatry? This is the story of the rise and fall of King Solomon. A night the kingdom would never forget. Jerusalem had gone quiet. The winds that once carried the shouts of David's victories now whispered rumors. The palace, once the symbol of glory, now bore a secret so heavy it nearly crushed the soul of a king. It all began on a rooftop, and it came to pass in an evening tide that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. 2 Samuel 11:2. From that high place King David saw her, Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. She was bathing, and David looked too long. He didn't turn away. He didn't walk back inside. And David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her. 2 Samuel 11:4. Bathsheba became pregnant, but she wasn't a widow. She wasn't single. She was married to one of David's most loyal soldiers, Uriah the Hittite, who was away fighting David's war. What does a man after God's heart do when he sins? David tried to cover it. He called Uriah home, hoping he would lie with his wife and believe the child was his. But Uriah, honorable and disciplined, refused to enjoy the comforts of home while his brothers were at war. The ark and Israel and Judah abide in tents. Shall I then go into mine house? 2 Samuel 11:11. David's plan failed, and so the king took a darker turn. He wrote a letter to Joab, the commander of the army. "Set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die." 2 Samuel 11:15. He sealed it, handed it to Uriah, and sent him to die by his own hand. David thought it was over. He married Bathsheba. The kingdom moved on, but heaven had not. God sent Nathan the prophet with a story, a parable about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. David, unaware it was about him, was furious. "The man that hath done this shall surely die." 2 Samuel 12:5. Then Nathan turned the blade. "Thou art the man." 2 Samuel 12:7. David was crushed, his heart broke in repentance. "I have sinned against the Lord." 2 Samuel 12:13. But consequences still came. Nathan told him the child would not survive. Bathsheba gave birth to a son, but the child grew ill. For 7 days David fasted, wept, and lay on the ground, refusing food, refusing comfort, pleading with God. "Who can tell whether God will be gracious to me that the child may live?" 2 Samuel 12:22. But on the 7th day the child died. But when David saw that his servants whispered, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said unto his servants, "Is the child dead?" And they said, "He is dead." 2 Samuel 12:19. David stood, washed, worshipped, because even in judgment he knew God was still just. Then came a new beginning. David comforted Bathsheba, and in time she conceived again. This child was also born in silence, away from the noise of war and scandal. But something was different. God spoke, and she bare a son, and he called his name Solomon, and the Lord loved him. 2 Samuel 12:24. And through Nathan the prophet, God gave the boy a second name, and he sent by the hand of Nathan, and he called his name Jedediah because of the Lord. 2 Samuel 12:25. Jedediah means beloved of the Lord. What do we make of this? How can the same God who judged the first child so severely bless the second so powerfully? Because God is both just and merciful. The first child died to demonstrate that sin has consequences, but the second lived to show that grace always has the last word. David didn't deserve it. Bathsheba didn't earn it. But that's the point. Grace isn't earned, it's given. Solomon's story mirrors another figure in the Bible, Jephthah. Jephthah was the son of a prostitute. His brothers rejected him and cast him out. Thou shalt not inherit in our father's house, for thou art the son of a strange woman. Judges 11:2. But when Israel was in trouble, they came running back. Come and be our captain. Judges 11:6. Rejected by men, chosen by God, just like Solomon, whose very existence was born from rejection, but whose destiny was carved by divine purpose. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. So many people believe their story is over because of how it started. I was born out of wedlock. I come from a broken home. My parents were never married. My father was never there. But Solomon's story says something louder than shame. God can write royal destinies on broken scrolls. Yes, he can take your worst chapter and use it as the foundation for your greatest calling. Solomon wasn't the eldest. He wasn't the most admired. He wasn't the warrior like Absalom, nor the ambitious favorite like Adonijah. He was quiet, young, born from controversy. By human standards, he had no claim to the throne. But God doesn't follow human standards. King David had many sons, and with them came many complications. Amnon, David's firstborn, who committed a vile act against his half-sister Tamar. His story ended in betrayal and death at the hands of Absalom. 2 Samuel 13:28-29. Absalom, charismatic and bold, he staged a full-blown rebellion against David, even declaring himself king. 2 Samuel 15:10. But he too died. His hair caught in a tree, pierced through the heart. 2 Samuel 18:9-14. Adonijah, the fourth son of David, strong and popular. With the elders and priests by his side, he tried to crown himself king, without David's knowledge, without God's approval. Then Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. 1 Kings 1-5. He gathered horsemen, chariots, and 50 men to run before him. He held a feast, invited nobles, even brought Joab, the army commander, and Abiathar, the priest. But he left out two people, Solomon and Nathan, the prophet, because deep down, Adonijah knew he wasn't God's choice. Years earlier, David had made a vow to Bathsheba, Surely Solomon your son shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne. 1 Kings 1:13. But David was old now, weak, bedridden, and Adonijah was seizing the moment. So Bathsheba, with Nathan's guidance, entered the king's chamber. The scene was tense. David lay covered with blankets, barely warm, surrounded by silence and servants. Bathsheba bowed before him. My lord, did you not swear to me that Solomon would reign after you? 1 Kings 1:17. Then Nathan entered. My lord the king, have you said Adonijah shall reign after me? Because today he has sacrificed oxen and sheep, and they are eating and drinking with him, saying, Long live King Adonijah. 1 Kings 1:24-25. David, weakened but not defeated, rose in resolve. As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my soul out of every distress, as I swore unto you by the Lord, even so will I do this day. 1 Kings 1:29-30. David gave urgent instructions. Take Solomon, riding on David's own mule, a royal symbol. Anoint him with oil at Gihon spring, a sacred and visible place. Have Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet officiate. Blow the trumpet. Declare him king in the presence of all Israel. Anoint him their king over Israel. Then blow the trumpet and say, Long live King Solomon. 1 Kings 1:34. And it happened, just as David commanded. As Solomon was anointed, a trumpet sounded over the hills of Jerusalem. The people rejoiced with such volume that it shook the ground, so that the earth was rent with the sound of them. 1 Kings 1:40. Meanwhile, at Adonijah's feast, the mood turned sour. The guests heard the trumpet. They heard the people shouting, Long live King Solomon. Panic spread. Faces paled. Adonijah's coup had collapsed before it ever began. And all the guests that were with Adonijah were afraid and rose up and went every man his way. 1 Kings 1:49. Adonijah fled to the altar, grabbing its horns, begging for mercy. And Solomon, now king, spared his life, for the moment. Think about this. The son no one expected to rule was now wearing the crown. The child born out of a broken past had been chosen by God to lead a nation. The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118:22. David didn't just leave Solomon a throne, he gave him a mandate. Only the Lord give thee wisdom and understanding, and give thee charge concerning Israel, that thou mayest keep the law of the Lord thy God. 1 Chronicles 22:12-13. David knew the crown was heavy, but he also knew God had chosen Solomon not just to rule, but to build the house of the Lord. This moment wasn't just political, it was prophetic. There's one more detail. The name Solomon in Hebrew is Shalomo, derived from shalom, meaning peace. David, the warrior king, could not build the temple because his hands were stained with blood. But Solomon, the king of peace, would build God's dwelling place. Behold, a son shall be born to thee. His name shall be Solomon, and I will give peace and quietness unto Israel in his days. 1 Chronicles 22:9. God was doing something new. He was raising a king not forged in battle, but bathed in grace. The throne was now Solomon's. The sounds of celebration had faded. The trumpets were silent. The cheers had quieted. And all that remained was the weight of a nation on the shoulders of a young man. How do you rule a kingdom once led by giants like David? How do you lead a people chosen by God? Solomon was barely past 20. No battle scars, no army experience, no long years in court, only a heart and a desire to do right by the God who placed him on the throne. He was king, but he didn't yet know how to be one. So he went to seek God. And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places. 1 Kings 3:3. At the time, the Ark of the Covenant had not yet been placed in the temple. So Solomon traveled to the most important high place in Israel, Gihon, a city just north of Jerusalem. There stood the ancient bronze altar built by Moses, 2 Chronicles 1:3-6. It was there, surrounded by solemn silence and smoke from the offering fires, that Solomon did something few kings had ever done. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, and offered 1,000 burnt offerings upon that altar. 1 Kings 3:4, 1,000 sacrifices. Not just a ritual, but a statement, a cry to heaven. I am not here for power, I am here for God. That night, as flames from the altar dimmed and the stars rose above the hills of Gibeon, God came. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, Ask what I shall give thee. 1 Kings 3-5, the creator of the universe, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, stood before a young king and asked, What do you want, Solomon? Ask me. Anything. This was no ordinary moment. It was a divine test, a sacred invitation. Solomon did not rush to answer. He did not ask for gold or military might, not for long life, not for revenge, not for fame. Instead, he remembered David, his father, his example, a man after God's heart. Thou hast shown unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness. 1 Kings 3:6. Then he looked at himself, not as a ruler, but as a child. I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. 1 Kings 3:7, and he said, "Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people?" 1 Kings 3-9. He didn't ask for wealth. He didn't ask for power. He asked for wisdom to serve well. And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. 1 Kings 3:10. Then came God's reply, not just a blessing, but a covenant. Because you have asked this thing, and have not asked for yourself long life, neither riches nor the life of your enemies, but have asked for thyself understanding. Behold, I have done according to thy words. 1 Kings 3:11-12. And then the promise that would define Solomon's legacy. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. 1 Kings 3:12. But God wasn't done. Because Solomon had chosen wisdom over wealth, God gave him both. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. 1 Kings 3:13. And finally the condition, and if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. 1 Kings 3:14. Solomon awoke, and he realized it wasn't just a dream, it was a divine commissioning. He returned to Jerusalem and did something rare and beautiful. And he stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all his servants. 1 Kings 3:15. Before ruling others, Solomon worshipped. Before sitting on the throne, he bowed before God. The dream at Gibeon was not just the beginning of Solomon's wisdom. It was the moment that revealed his heart. A heart that was humble, a heart that sought understanding, a heart that placed the needs of the people before his own gain. And in that moment, God established him not just as a king, but as a leader after his own heart. Solomon didn't become wise by birth. He became wise because he chose to honor God before himself, and heaven responded with blessings that would echo through history. The newly anointed king sat upon the throne. Solomon, young, inexperienced, unproven, had just returned from Gibeon, where God had visited him in a dream. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. 1 Kings 3:12. The royal court doors opened. 2 women walked in. Both were prostitutes, and both came with the same claim. Each insisted that the living child in her arms belonged to her, and the dead child buried quietly the night before belonged to the other. There were no fathers, no witnesses, no proof, just a heartbreaking, high-stakes standoff in the presence of the king. And there came 2 women, and they stood before him. 1 Kings 3:16. One woman said, "We dwelled in the same house. I gave birth while she was there. On the 3rd day she also gave birth, but her child died in the night." 1 Kings 3:17-19. She claimed the other woman switched the babies while she slept, stealing the living child and replacing it with the dead one. The other woman insisted the opposite. 2 mothers, 2 babies, one alive, one dead, and one throne, tasked with the impossible. Solomon looked at both women. Each was passionate, each seemed desperate, but one of them was lying. And if he made the wrong decision, an innocent child would be given to a fraud, while the real mother grieved. There was no way to verify the story. No way, unless you could discern the human heart. This was the moment, the test of wisdom, the first case for Israel's new king, and Solomon did something no judge had ever done. "Bring me a sword." Gasps echoed through the room. The guards stiffened in shock. The king said, "Bring me a sword," and they brought a sword before the king. 1 Kings 3:24. Eyes widened. Whispers stirred. Was he serious? Then the king spoke again. "Divide the living child in 2, and give half to the one and half to the other." 1 Kings 3:25. The room froze. This couldn't be real. Cut the baby in half? Then, out of the silence, came a cry of love. One of the women stepped forward, tears filling her eyes, her voice trembling with anguish. "O my Lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it." 1 Kings 3:26. So she would rather lose her child than see him harmed. But the other woman stood stone cold and said, "Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it." 1 Kings 3:26b. And with that, Solomon's path was clear. Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is his mother. 1 Kings 3:27. And just like that, the real mother was revealed, not by proof, not by testimony, but by the sacrificial love of a mother and the discernment of a king. Word spread like wildfire. This wasn't just a clever ruling. This was divine wisdom on display. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. 1 Kings 3:28. Solomon was no longer the child king. He was the one who could see through deception and bring justice in ways no man could manufacture. Israel began to trust him, and heaven had confirmed him. David had once stood before the prophet Nathan and whispered a dream. "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwelleth within curtains." 2 Samuel 7:2. He longed to build a house for the Lord, a permanent place for the Ark of the Covenant, a place where God's name would dwell forever. But God said no. David was a man of war. His hands were stained with blood. 1 Chronicles 28:3. "You shall not build a house for my name, but your son shall build it for my name." 1 Chronicles 22:8-10. So David gathered materials, drew plans, wrote songs of worship, and prayed for the day when his son would bring the vision to life. That son was Solomon, to be continued.